Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Gurnett. My wife, Kelsey, and I are local business owners with Indiana Mosaic and Smith Street Studio. Today, I'm here in Yorktown with the town manager, Chase Bruton, Dr. Greg Hinshaw from the Yorktown Community Schools. We're here to have a conversation about schools, growth, long-term planning, and how it all comes together. So let's get started, guys. Dr. Hinshaw, to start us off, what would you want residents to understand first about Yorktown Community Schools' current enrollment capacity and planning for the future?
I think it's important for people to remember that Yorktown Community Schools had a demographic study done a long time ago that sort of guides both our enrollment strategy as well as our strategy around improving facilities. And so the board and superintendent long ago agreed on those capacities, and we've worked that plan for about 9 years now in terms of building out for the capacity that we planned for a long time ago.
When people hear about new housing or development, many immediately worry that the school system is already at or beyond capacity. How would you summarize Yorktown Community's current capacity today?
So the district's buildings are built for a total capacity of about 3,000. It's approximately 225 students per grade level. That's in accordance with a plan, again, that was adopted back in 2018. And all 4 of our school facilities have been renovated for that capacity. So if you look at our current enrollment numbers, we're below 2,800. So there's roughly 250 student capacity K-12 currently existing in addition to current enrollment. And then we have approximately 700 out-of-district transfer students, and we can manage that enrollment, that non-resident enrollment, year by year with caps in individual grades.
Can you explain the current balance between in-district and out-of-district students and why that has been an intentional and beneficial part of Yorktown's enrollment strategy for both the in-district and the out-of-district students?
Sure. So currently, about 25% of our students are non-resident transfer students. That number has grown significantly since 2009. It was in 2009 that the Indiana General Assembly changed school funding and allowed for districts to take non-resident transfers. And so that process has evolved over the course of the last 15 years or so. One of the things that I think I would point out is that when the state made that change, they eliminated the local property tax for the school general fund. And so anytime there's an opportunity to enroll students, which would be both fall and spring, we're looking at our current enrollment. We're establishing the slots available based on the capacity, and then we're accepting the applications to try to fill up to that capacity. And the good news is that we're only over 225 in maybe 1 or 2 of our grade levels currently.
How does Yorktown Community Schools make sure there's flexibility for families who do move in, though?
Right. Good question. And the good news is that we are not at our capacity in most grade levels. And so what that means is that we're constantly evaluating where we are in terms of enrollment. And so it's a state mandated process that you have to use to take applications, and then you set your capacity. And if you are over your capacity in terms of the number of applications, you have to go through a lottery system. And so we're constantly evaluating what space is available. And oftentimes students who are on that waiting list for the transfer process may not get notified until right before school starts. So we're constantly evaluating what does our resident enrollment look like and how much space do we have. And there are transfer applications. Those parents may be told, well, we won't know until maybe even after school starts, a day or 2 into the school year. And then we use that waiting list to backfill those slots as they are available. And in fact, in 25, 26, we still had capacity in nearly every grade level.
And how do you two coordinate together? Is there any kind of annual approach that you guys do, or just every time something kind of comes to the forefront?
I think I can talk on this. Is every time that we have a development that's a possibility, even if it's just a developer approaching the town and trying to work out some kind of deal or acquire land, the first person I call before I even call my town council is I call Dr. Hinshaw. We had that actually occur with a housing development in Muncie, but that is inside of the Yorktown schools. And when I became aware of that, I immediately sent him the subdivision plan that I was able to get my hands on and say, hey, these houses aren't going up yet. There's not a groundbreaking yet, but I want you to know that this is in the pipeline and it's a go ahead. And so we try to have that open line of communication.
I think the other factor that's out there is whether it's the town or whether it's the school, a significant portion, probably almost all of the town budget, but a significant portion of our budget is funded from property taxes. And so anytime there's growth in assessed valuation inside of the taxing unit, whether it's the school or the town, that's good for those units of government as well. And at least from the school standpoint, if you look at the school's tax rate, how has the school been able to do about $60 million worth of capital improvement, and yet our tax rate has been relatively flat over several years, almost a decade? It's had some fluctuation up and down from year to year, but the reality is it's because the assessed valuation trend is growing. And so that has allowed us to undertake some of those projects, good planning, and again, not have to have an astronomically high tax rate in order to do it.
And just to speak on that, from 25 to 26, the town's tax rate actually dropped by a little bit over 12%. I know people see on their tax bills their assessed values have gone up, but some of that is also spurred by new development and new growth, right? And so that growth pushes tax rates lower. And so a lot of times what we hear is, oh, they're building something new, I can't wait for my taxes to go up. The opposite is actually true. It's an inverted relationship there.
I think what I would say, I appreciate the fact that people care enough about the quality of the school system and the enrollment to have an opinion on that. I think that's reflective of the ownership that the community feels of the schools. And I think that's great because we want people who are invested in the success of the school. I think if you looked around in the state of Indiana, declining schools have problems, growing schools have problems. And from the administration side, I would take the problems of growth over the problems of decline any day. When you're having to make decisions about what programs to cut, what teacher positions to eliminate, what buildings to close, and then you don't have the money to fund routine maintenance and things like that, that is not a great place to be. So you always want to choose the problems of growth over the problems of decline. And what that means is that you're constantly trying to balance capacity against growth in the community, the transfer numbers, things like that. But I think what I would say to the public is it's something that we have given a lot of thought to, and it allows us, that growth allows us to do things that we would not be able to do without the growth. And what I mean by that is, again, academic programming, extracurricular programming, compensation of the best staff that we want to attract and retain, and then in addition to that, facility improvements along the way.
So what does it mean when you say the schools are right-sized for the future?
We feel like 225 students per grade level is the right size for both opportunity and the personal connections. And that's what we've been focused on for several years.
What would you want residents to understand first about how Yorktown is approaching growth, development, long-term planning?
Yeah, I think it's very important for us to kind of start this conversation with the fact that Yorktown growth isn't happening by accident, right? Or without a plan. We're very intentional about the type of growth that we're pursuing here. But we also want to be very thoughtful about what that means to the future of Yorktown. We need to make sure that we have staffing in place that can support this type of growth, whether that's public safety or our utility staff, or if we have the infrastructure in place for this. So we just yesterday were talking about possible future infrastructure needs for the next 5 to 10 years. And, you know, we have capacity in the water department. What does the capacity look like at the sewer department? What does the smart rolling pace to these housing types is very important.
So there have been a few different development projects over the last few years. Can you give any specific examples that can help people understand how the Oliver impacted, how Dougherty Preserve impacted, and how they believe the Michelle might?
Yeah, so the Oliver right now is 24 units. It is completely rented out. It actually has a wait list. Last time I checked it, I think it was 60 people were on the wait list, which shows that the market is strong and that there's a market for that type of home. I know for a fact that at the Oliver they have one student who doesn't live there full time. He's in a split family, and so when he's with dad, he's at the Oliver. The Doherty Preserve is 180 units. It is currently at 90% capacity, which again shows the strength of that market in this area. And last I had heard, there was 9 students who were being picked up by the bus there. And so obviously those different housing types produce a different impact on the school enrollment. With the Michelle, when we were looking at the zoning for that, we had a pretty candid conversation with the developer, and we talked to him about it and said, we don't think that 3-bedroom apartments are appropriate for this market. We want to see what your thoughts are on 1-bedroom and 2 bedrooms and maybe studios. And the developer said, we're not trying to build these for families. We want young professionals and maybe people who are aging in place. And so that entire 90-unit building is all studio, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments.
And so impact on the school is expected to be pretty small then.
Very minimal.
There are some very practical concerns that people raise about busing and school traffic, morning congestion. What would you like residents to understand about how in-district enrollment, commuting patterns, and future growth may affect those issues?
This is a question I get a lot, and it's because it's something that people deal with on a day-to-day basis, especially if they take 32 or Tiger Drive. But the thing with school traffic is that students busing in has much less impact on our traffic concerns. Having out-of-district students obviously puts some pressure on the roads and how traffic is flowing. We expect as growth occurs, as Dr. Hinshaw alluded to earlier, that we would have less out-of-district enrollment, and we would expect that then to move more towards a bus-based system, which should alleviate some of those traffic concerns. The next piece is that we are being very intentional with some future infrastructure projects, specifically at Tiger and River Road. We have actually secured some federal funding through the Metropolitan Planning Organization to do a large infrastructure upgrade there that will help with some of those queuing lines and allow that intersection to still flow even while the school queuing is occurring.
How does responsible planning between the town and the school help protect what people value most about Yorktown? Strong schools, a connected community, long-term stability.
First off, the schools, I think, are the biggest draw to this community, but maintaining that level of excellence in the school system requires this stable funding that Dr. Hinshaw had talked about previously and that manageable enrollment. But at the same time, our growth needs to be balanced with their enrollment numbers. And so we want to have that sustainable growth to support our schools, services, and property values in the area. But we also want it to be sustainable for town services. We have to be able to provide water, sewer, our parks, public safety, all of those things need to be sustainable with growth. And so when we're looking at housing developments, different housing types, those obviously have different impacts on all of those different services. We're very cognizant of that.
When you think about Yorktown in 5 or 10 years from now, what are you and the town council, the administration of the town, what is it that you're trying to preserve and what are you trying to build?
Well, we often say in this office that Yorktown is the diamond of Delaware County. And my staff says that, my council says it, and we're going to keep repeating it because I think it's a good goal. I think it's true as it stands today. And I think it's something that we should always aspire to be. I hear oftentimes that Yorktown is a small community. I love that feel. But in all honesty, we're a community of 12,000 people.
When we step back and kind of look at the conversation that often happens in the public, which often comes out on a lot of Facebook threads, when we look at this, There's a common misconception that we are just over capacity, that we are stretched too thin, that our roadways can't handle it. How do we respond to anyone who's raising that concern to say we are planning, we are moving forward, we are not breaking the bank, we are not breaking the roadways, we are surviving well? What does that look like? I mean,
I think the biggest misconception is viewing growth itself as a threat. Unplanned growth can create some problems, but one of those big misconceptions that we hear is that new growth automatically means higher taxes. And as we spoke before, that's the opposite is actually true. Raising assessed values lowers the tax rate. Overcrowding of schools because of growth depends on the housing type, right, and the scale, or some sort of strain on public services. Is the reality is that responsible growth is often what helps maintain that financial stability for not only the town but also for the schools.
I think one of the things that comes to my mind is a data point that we actually have fewer resident students today than we did when I came to Yorktown, and fewer than there were a decade ago or more. And so there's this perception that in-district enrollment is growing so rapidly that we can't accommodate transfer students or we can't accommodate more growth, and that's simply not true. There are actually fewer resident students enrolled today than there were 10 years ago. And that's a reflection of the demographics of East Central Indiana.
That makes sense. What should residents feel confident about as they look at the future and the strategic planning that happens between the schools, the town, and many other organizations?
I think residents should feel confident that the core fundamentals that make communities successful are already here. As we said before, we have a top performing school. We're a safe community. I feel like we're a connected community, not only through infrastructure and trails, but also just in community activities and things along those lines. And we have strong parks, neighborhoods, and local amenities. I think that if you look around, this is a place that people want to be, and they should feel confident in that.
What comes to my mind is the tagline that Yorktown Schools has used for a long time is commitment, excellence, and opportunity. And when I think about my role as a superintendent, so how do I have a commitment to providing excellence and opportunity? And the number one way, and it's not glamorous, is to ensure that the financial resources are there to do that. And so you have to manage enrollment and manage growth in order to make sure that when somebody comes with a program that they say, hey, I would like to add this program, are the resources there to do it? Or we would like to improve this facility, are the resources there to do it? And then the other piece of it, I think, is the staffing. We employ about 375 people who are here on campus every day in an almost full-time capacity. And how do we have the ability to, again, attract and retain and compensate those people so that the people who are excellent at what they do are working in Yorktown and not somewhere else? And again, I think that is directly related to growth and our ability to attract and retain. Another factor that comes to mind, and it is a school factor to a degree, but people feel like, well, the downside of growing AV means that my house is worth more, so then I'm taxed on those unrealized gains, if you will. The other reality is the housing market in this community is probably the best in this part of the state. And so when you're ready to downsize or you're ready to move somewhere else, you can sell your house generally at a profit.
So Chase, is there anything you'd like to add? Any last closing thoughts?
I would just like to add that Dr. Hinshaw and I have both made it a priority to be accessible because we believe residents should hear directly from the people with the facts and who are helping make these decisions. We think that these questions are healthy, but informed dialogue, I think, is what's going to move the community forward, not rumors and things along those lines. Looking at the community as a whole, I think Yorktown has strong leadership. We have strong schools, and we have people who care deeply about this community. And we have some very core values that I think are beneficial and will pay off for us for years to come.
Yeah. I think the partnership is phenomenal. The very first Chamber of Commerce meeting I went to in Yorktown, previous town manager, said exactly what Chase just said. He said, we see the schools as the #1 economic development driver in our community. And that makes it easy to have that partnership. And we, I think, communicate well, and we want to be transparent in what we're doing.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here, talk with me, and talk with the community. And hopefully we've informed some people and added some good thoughts.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for
Good
the
clarity.
opportunity.
You're welcome.